Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Brown, and welcome to the very first episode of the Movie Madness Popcorn Review. In this podcast, I will be discussing everything from Iron Man to movies like How to Train Your Dragon, giving my outtakes of the movies and how the movies can fit in today's society. Today, I will be talking about the world famous film Wreck-It Ralph. I will be breaking it down scene by scene and giving my thoughts and opinions about the character's actions, emotions, and the character's motivations and unique personalities. So without further ado, let's wreck it. Movie opens with Ralph narrating, talking about how he's done the same thing for the last 30 years, wreck stuff. And we learn that Ralph is a video game character in a game called Fix-It Felix Jr., where his main job is to wreck stuff, as in his name. And when I say stuff, I mean an apartment building where all these tiny little people called the Nicelanders live. But spoiler alert, they aren't that nice. But more on that later. Here we are introduced to Fix It Felix, the guy who everybody loves, the hero everybody looks upon for help. And just as in his name, Felix's main job is to fix things that Ralph destroys with this magic gold hammer Felix has. So they're both just doing their job, but there's one difference between the two of them. Ralph gets looked down upon for just doing his job, while Felix gets highly praised and is treated to pies, medals, and parties. Now that seems a little unfair, don't you think? I mean, this guy is just doing his job. It's like when an actor in a film plays the bad guy and everybody grows to hate that character without a second thought. And when I see another actor in a movie who played a villain, I'm like, hey, wasn't that guy the villain in that movie? But you see, at the end of the day, it's the actor's job. They may not get treated as harshly as Ralph by living in a dump, but they still get treated unfairly because they get paid less than the person who plays the hero. And at the end of the day, Ralph just wants the same treatment as Felix. So we learn that when the arcade closes, all the video game characters can switch from game to game. Like characters like Pac-Man can cross over to a game like Galaga. So it's kind of like a mall. After a game character leaves their game, they walk out into this nice area where they can see all the other games spread out, with their titles above the entrances. which all look the same, pitch black. Anywho, Ralph explains that after work, his work colleagues still look down on him, and while all the Nicelanders in Felix live in the penthouse and celebrate, Ralph goes to the only home he's ever known, which is a pile of bricks and a tree stump. Can't forget the tree stump, y'all. Which he says is comfortable, but let's be honest here. A brick pile as a home and a stump would be very painful for any person, even a video game character. We soon learn that Ralph is not actually talking to us and breaking the fourth wall like crazy. He's speaking to a group of bad guys called the Battalion, which is like a little therapy session where all the bad guys of their games come together and talk about their feelings. Here, the villains try to explain to Ralph that without bad guys, there would be no good guys. In the words of Zangief, another bad guy of a different game says that just because he's a bad guy doesn't mean that he's a bad guy. As to say that just because you do bad things for your job doesn't make you a bad guy outside of work. Which, I ain't gonna lie, first time I saw that, I'm like, what in blazes is this man talking about? Ralph has been avoiding the bad guys for years now. This is the first time he showed up to his therapy session. Which we learned that he shows up because it's his game's 30th anniversary, which he should be celebrating with all of his friends in the game. Which, oh yeah, I forgot. He doesn't have friends because they treat him like trash. Oh my goodness. But then he says something bizarre to the bad guys. He says, and I quote, "I don't want to be the bad guy anymore." Now, we as the audience can see where he's coming from. This man has been doing his job for 30 years now and still hasn't gotten any recognition or respect. Just a toss in the mud from the Nicelanders. Ralph's story is much like a lot of other stories we see. We see stories all the time where the princess doesn't want to rule her kingdom or get married. She just wants to be free. All the bad guys suddenly start panicking because saying he doesn't want to be the bad guy anymore is bad as a chef saying they want to quit. Without a chef, there's no restaurant, and all the workers lose their jobs. But in Ralph's case, his game could get unplugged, as we learn later. This is the first time we hear the term of someone going turbo, which we later learn is when a character leaves his or her game and tries to be part of a different game, causing chaos and destruction in the process. In the end, Ralph says that he's not going to go turbo, and the whole gang holds hands and says their affirmation. I'm bad, and that's good. I'll never be good, and that's not bad. There's no one I'd rather be than me. Now, Ralph is still focused on being a good guy, and he doesn't say their affirmation when they all say it together. Now, I think that this line can relate to a lot of us. A lot of us are trying to be someone or something we're not, but we just need to open our eyes and see the good of life right in front of us, even when the bad things happen. So the Battalion meeting ends, so all the bad guys ride a little train from Pac-Man's place back to the lobby of all the games. And we see the train travels through the game courts back to the game central center, which is in a power strip, that plug-in spot where multiple things can be plugged in. I think it's just really cool how the animators and designers put the bad guys into the Pac-Man game, and that where they meet is in the Ghost Generation box. They even went as far as to make them look like the Pac-Man animation when they are leaving the Generation box. We also see Ralph steal 2 cherries in the game that are bonus points you can collect. And when he's questioned by the security guard at the entrance of the lobby, he lies saying that he brought no fruit with him, which he did, but for a good cause. He gave it to some poor game characters, which included all the characters from the game Cuba, which had become unplugged, and they had become unemployed characters, so kind of like homeless people on the street. I don't know about anyone else, but doesn't that scene kind of remind you of when Aladdin stole some bread and gave it to some of the poor children of Agrabah? Anyway, that's a different movie for a different day. Ralph eventually makes it back to his game to find out that his colleagues are having a 30th anniversary celebration without him, as he spies on them using 2 glass bottles that he finds in his dump. We see that they even invited Pac-Man, who wasn't even a part of the game. Later, we also learned that Mario was also invited, which we all know was wrong in so many ways. They invite just about everyone who isn't in their game, but excludes a major character who is actually in the game. So Ralph decides to stop by, which was unexpected by all of the Nicelanders because he wasn't invited. Gene, one of the main Nicelanders, is the one who opens the door, but is in shock to see Ralph and slams it right in his face. So as always, they all count on Felix to get Ralph out of there. As Felix heads out into the penthouse hallway to talk to Ralph, Ralph soon learns that they're going to have cake soon, so he manipulates Felix to let him into the party by telling him that he's never had cake before and he would really like to try some. Felix, being the kind soul he is, asks if Ralph would like to come in and have some. And that's all Ralph needed to hear, as he pushes Felix aside and goes through the front door, where everybody just stops what they're doing and gazes in terror as if Godzilla had just walked in. Now Ralph is a giant compared to the Nicelanders and Felix, so he has to duck his head a little to be able to not to break the ceiling. Now everyone doesn't want Ralph to be there, which is highly noticeable as they all look either annoyed or terrified. But Gene is more annoyed than ever and wants to know why in the blazes Ralph is there. Now, although everyone is against Ralph being there, Felix stands up for Ralph, saying he's only at the party for some cake. Now, that is only half true. Ralph came to the party because for once in his life, he wanted to not be hated by everyone and just wanted to fit in. Ralph breaks in saying that he should be here because he's a big part of the game, which he is. Then he bends down to Gene's level to say, "Why are you here, Gene?" With all due respect, Ralph's not wrong. Gene does nothing for the game. He's technically an NPC, a character who is just there and does nothing for the game whatsoever. This squabbling ends when the cake is rolled out, which I gotta say, that was pretty fast. As soon as Felix said that Ralph was only there for the cake was out in the next 5 seconds. As Ralph looks at the cake looking for himself, he finds himself in the mud, while everyone else is at the top of the cake. Ralph finds out that the mud his candy figurine is placed in is made out of chocolate. Ralph says he isn't very fond of chocolate, to which Mary, one of the Nicelanders, replies, "I did not know that." You want to know why she didn't know that? It's because none of them ever has taken the time to get to know Ralph. So maybe, Mary, you would know that if y'all weren't so busy treating him as if he's some kind of monster. On top of that, his figurine looked like an ugly troll, not even a person. Now, Ralph says that his figurine would be happier if he was at the top with everyone else. So he moves his figurine up to where everyone else is and puts a smile on his figurine to show he belongs up there just like the rest of them. But Gene finds this unacceptable and knocks Ralph back down into the mud, saying there's not enough space for Ralph. They end up going back and forth, with Gene stating that Ralph can't be on the top because Felix always gets his medal on the roof. And if he and Ralph took turns being on the top, Felix wouldn't get his medal. But Ralph says that for once they could just give the medal to him, as he puts it on his figurine. Now Felix tries to break them up, but it's no use. Gene has to make something clear. Bad guys don't win medals. And this is when things start to heat up. Ralph says that he could win a medal, and to that Gene says if he did win a medal, he could stay up there in the penthouse with them. But it would never happen. The idea that Ralph could win a medal was ridiculous to Gene. Gene then takes it too far, which makes Ralph really lose his cool. He says that Ralph's just a bad guy who wrecks the building, which is technically true, but Ralph is in complete denial of that and believes he could be more. But out of anger and rage, he destroys the cake with his fist. Then he leaves saying that he's gonna win a medal and prove Gene and all of them wrong. Now Ralph sees this as his big chance to finally be looked upon as a hero and not just some guy who wrecks the building, and he takes this chance. Ralph ends up at a game called Tappers, which is basically where all the other game characters go to get a drink. And while looking in the lost and found box for a medal, he runs into a space cadet from another game called Hero's Duty, who says in his game they have to fight bugs and climb buildings all for a medal, which suddenly interests Ralph, as that's exactly what he needs. So due to an incident, Ralph ends up in the space cadet suit and makes his way to Hero's Duty. Here we are introduced to Calhoun, who is the commander over all the soldiers, but doesn't know that Ralph is not supposed to be there. Ralph ends up ruining the entire game for a player because he's scared out of his mind as the game over shows up. Calhoun approaches Ralph and she is not happy because Ralph interfered with the player in the real world who was playing the game and got them killed. So Ralph decided that after that painful experience, he was not doing that again. Calhoun had pointed to where the medal was, so off Ralph went into that direction. Meanwhile, back in the game Fix-It Felix Jr., the same player who Ralph had messed up in Hero's Duty had decided to play that game. But there was only one problem. Ralph wasn't there. And when he didn't show up, all the Nightlanders started panicking, right where the player could see them. By that time, it was already over. She had called the owner, Mr. Littleack, who said he'd have to get someone to look at the game, but if they couldn't fix it, then he might as well have to finally unplug the game. After being open for 30 years, now, just as Felix tries to keep everyone calm, saying that Ralph will be back soon, which he won't, but hey, they don't know that. Their game gets an out of order sign placed on the front. Now, the next step to out of order is you're out the door, buddy. It means throwing the trash. Unplug, sayonara. So they all have a reason to be distraught. Now, Felix says that Ralph might just be as tappers as normal. Well, it's good to know that Felix knows Ralph's main hangout spot. Now, a train car pulls through the game. Of course, Felix thinks it's Ralph, but it's not. It's Cuba, who recently saw Ralph go into the Hero's Duty game. Luckily for them, Felix speaks Cuba's language. How, you ask? I don't know. But he says that Cuba says that Ralph's gone turbo, which he hasn't, but that's what they are led to believe by Ralph's recent actions. Back in the Hero's Duty, Ralph finally finds a medal and makes his way towards it. Meanwhile, we see Felix has made his way all the way to Hero's Duty, and as soon as he sees Calhoun, he's instantly in love with her. But she shoves his remark about her beauty right off. As Felix explains that he's looking for Ralph, a crash comes from the tower. In the tower, Ralph has received the medal, but on his way out, stepped on a cyborg egg. And the baby cyborg attacks Ralph, and while he tries to get the bug off, he falls into an escape pod, where he gets trapped inside. As the escape pod starts flying, it flies right past Calhoun and Felix in slow motion. Which we should all just take a moment to thank whoever had the idea for slow motion, because it just makes the scene way cooler, especially scenes with Sonic the Hedgehog. But I'm getting off track. Back to what happens. So, the escape pod makes its way out of the game to the lobby, where it flies right into a game called Sugar Rush, a candy-themed racing game. They both get ejected out of the pod, and Ralph lands in the candy cane tree, while the cyborg sinks into a taffy pool. As Ralph celebrates his victory over the defeat of the cyborg, he realizes that his medal is gone. As he starts to panic, he spots it in a nearby tree, and he starts to climb. On his way up, he meets Vanellope Von Sweets, a little girl who annoys Ralph while climbing the tree by asking him all these questions about himself, and later starts to mimic what he says. Soon she realizes that the meadow is in the tree, and she says, "Sweet mother of monkey milk." Now, I've never heard anyone use that phrase before, so that's definitely something new you wouldn't hear every day. She ends up taking it and leaving Ralph in a taffy pool, which he falls in when the candy cane branch breaks. And this is the first time we see Vanellope's glitch, which makes us all wonder what in the blazes just happened, y'all. Well, I'll tell you what just happened. A little kid just clowned Ralph and made off with his medal. Back in the lobby of all the games, Felix and Calhoun have found out which way Ralph went. We get some interesting info of the cyborgs, like the one that went into Sugar Rush with Ralph. Calhoun says that cyborgs know 3 words: eat, kill, multiply. They will tear that game to shreds without a beacon to stop them, which is basically a bright light. And once they destroy that game, they won't stop there. They'll destroy every game in the arcade until there's nothing left. But luckily for us, the cyborg died in a taffy swamp. Or did it? Or did it? Here, we see a little bit of Felix's optimism, thinking the cyborgs will stop at Sugar Rush and won't destroy the whole arcade. We also get to hear Calhoun's tragic backstory, which makes her the mean, ruthless person she is today. The one day she didn't do a perimeter check was the day of her wedding, where her groom was killed by a giant cyborg, and she's never been the same since. For those of you who are like, what's a cyborg? I'll kind of explain it as like a giant cockroach with green, big old eyes, you know. Ugh, nasty little creatures. So Felix decides that Ralph is technically his mess, so he decides to go off with Calhoun, and off they go. Felix feels initially responsible for Ralph, as it's technically his job to fix Ralph's messes. Back in Sugar Rush, a big race is about to start, and we, the audience, are introduced to King Candy, the ruler of Sugar Rush. Air quotes. We soon realize that the starting roster for the game, the people of Sugar Rush race to determine who will be on that roster. But to enter the competition, you need 1 gold coin, which is why Vanellope needed Ralph's medal. As she tosses hers in, everyone is shocked to see that she's in the competition. Kinda the same way the Nicelanders looked at Ralph when he showed up to the party, uninvited. And in Sugar Rush, they don't even call her Vanellope, they call her the Glitch, because of the glitch she has. King Candy sends out 2 cops, which are literal donuts, to go catch Vanellope. But they get distracted when Ralph shows up to get revenge on Vanellope for stealing his medal, you know. But he looks like a giant monster because he's covered in taffy and all sorts of other candies. They eventually capture him when a giant cupcake falls on top of him, and he can't move his body. Ralph has just managed to destroy all of the other spectator boxes filled with different candy people while trying to catch Vanellope, who escapes during all the chaos with her go-kart race that she calls the lickety-split. Everybody is against Vanellope racing, even the king himself, as what we learn from that scene. Next scene, we see King Candy's castle, and right outside he has an army of Oreos. And let me just say that their Oreo chant is so catchy that I still sing it to this day. In the castle, Ralph is questioned by King Candy, and he finally gets the taffy off him, where Ralph finds out that Vanellope used his medal to enter the race, and now it's only cold, and it won't return to the way it was until someone wins the cup at the end of the race. And at some point in this talk, Ralph calls King Candy a Neri wafer, which, for those of you who don't know, which I'm pretty sure most of y'all do, is a scrumptious cookie that you can probably find anywhere you buy groceries. That's right, that's the sponsor of today's video. King Candy orders his donuts to get Ralph out of that cupcake and put back on the train to send him back home. But Ralph refuses to leave without his medal and manages to break out of that cupcake. The donut police officers get out the oil hounds to go find Ralph, but they have no luck because Ralph has hidden himself in a pool of chocolate, which he has stated earlier that he hates. He uses a straw to breathe for air, and the sound his breathing makes sounds a lot like the breathing of Darth Vader. Don't know what Disney was thinking in this scene right here, but I'm just saying they sound very similar if you compare the two. Just as Ralph gets out of the chocolate pool, he sees some of the kid racers race by in their carts, and he follows them. He watches as the racers destroy Vanellope's car while making fun of her glitch. But see, these words sound familiar to y'all. You'll never be a racer because you're a glitch, and you always will be. Oh yeah, let's go see what Gene said. You'll never be a good guy because you're just the guy who wrecks the building. Looks like these two characters might have a lot more in common than we previously thought. Now Taffeta, who is the leader of all the other races, seems to be almost like Gene from Ralph's game. Ralph really loses it when Taffeta pushes Vanellope into the mud. That's when he gets out of hiding and scares away all those little brats picking on Vanellope. And we see them make a deal with each other. If Ralph helps Vanellope make a new go-kart racer, Vanellope will win the race and get back his medal. Do you ever find yourself longing for something more in life? A missing ingredient that could add to the delightful tryst? Well, look no further than the irresistible Nilla wafer cookies. These sweet, buttery gems, reminiscent of the beloved Nilla wafers, are more than just mere treats. Let me tell you, my friend, they embody the luxurious essence of vanilla. Sourced from a unique orchard that flourishes in warm climates, their flavor is nothing short of enchanting. In fact, the name Nilla is a charming abbreviation of vanilla, perfectly encapsulating the blissful experience these cookies have to offer. Indulge your cravings and allow the smooth taste of vanilla to transport you to a realm of sweet satisfaction. But that's just the beginning. Nilla wafers become an irresistible delight when dipped in milk, coffee, or hot chocolate, transforming into a soft and creamy morsel. Their sweetness and such goodness taste is endless, using them to create a luscious banana pudding, heavenly ice cream sandwiches, or even a dreamy vanilla wafer cake. Don't hesitate. Treat yourself to a box today at your favorite grocery store. Your taste buds will thank you later. Back with Felix and Calhoun, they have found the escape pod, but no sign of Ralph or the Cybug. Calhoun tries to use her tracker device, but the signal in Sugar Rush is blocking it. They end up on a candy cane branch and fall into Nesquik, which is basically quicksand but with Nesquik, which is a type of flavored chocolate milk. They soon learn that they are under a bunch of Laffy Taffy vines, and are attracted to whatever makes them laugh, which happens to be Calhoun smacking Felix over and over again, until the vines are low enough to grab. You would think that Felix would be seriously injured, but we learn that with his hammer, he can even fix his injuries. They manage to get out and gaze into each other's eyes for like 10 seconds, for real, while the Laffy Taffies are singing a romantic tune in the background. Until Calhoun breaks it up by shooting her gun in the air, and tells Felix that he needs to get to work fixing that escape pod. But deep underground, we see the Cybug, which has grown since we last saw it and changes into the pattern and colors of the candy that it eats. Meanwhile, back with Ralph and Vanellope, they break into a cart baking factory where they have to make a cart. Here, they have to make the cart in 1 minute. They have 1 minute exactly and have to play all these mini games like picking the right ingredients. For instance, a lot of different items fall in and they have to put the ingredients in the right bowl, but stay away from anything that isn't an ingredient. They end up completing all the mini games and their cart comes out looking like a total wreck to Ralph and the audience. But Vanellope loves it and is happy that she finally has a cart to race in. They even sign their names on it. But just then, King Candy and the donut officers burst in. And without any time to spare, Ralph squirts them with the frosting, and he and Vanellope hop into the cart, only to learn that Vanellope has never driven a cart before. So Ralph uses his enormously huge hands to push the cart with him and Vanellope, and they end up going right towards Cola Mountain, which is a mountain shaped just like a Coca-Cola bottle, which is actually pretty cool when you think about it. Ralph thinks they're going to be goners when Vanellope tells him to head straight towards the mountain, which he does, and they both survive, because thanks to Vanellope's glitch, they both make it inside the mountain, leaving King Candy and the officers stunned about where they went. Inside the mountain, instead of lava, the mountain, which also happens to be a volcano, is filled with hot, boiling Diet Coke, with Mentos right above which could fall at any moment. When the Mentos fall inside the Diet Coke, they cause a fizzy eruption to occur. Inside the mountain, they share a heart-to-heart moment, where they learn how they are both looked upon the same way in their games, and if Vanellope wins the race, she'll be treated fairly, just like everyone else. And when Ralph gets back his medal, he'll finally be accepted by the Nicelanders. We also learn that this is the place where Vanellope lives and is filled with a bunch of garbage that she uses to make her home. We also learn that glitches can't leave their game, so she's stuck in that game, stuck to being treated the same way, just like Ralph is. But not on Ralph's watch. He punches her a track with his bare hands so she can learn how to drive. And the song Shut Up and Drive plays as she learns to drive and maneuver around the track. Back at King Candy's castle, King Candy pushes some buttons on an old Nintendo controller and enters into the game's codes to retrieve the medal Vanellope used to enter the race. Now, boy, why didn't he just tell Ralph he could do that the entire time? Like, oh my goodness. But beyond that, we see that Vanellope was unplugged from the game and is pushed aside from where all the other codes are plugged in at. Mighty suspicious, if I do say so myself. Back with Felix and Calhoun, Felix gets kicked out of the escape pod because he calls her a dynamite gal, which brings up her former memories with her fiance, before he was eaten by a giant cyborg. Felix ends up right in front of King Candy's castle, and he is put in the fungeon, which he falls through a trap door disguised as a welcome mat. Next, we see King Candy find Ralph at a time when he's not with Vanellope and tries to reason with him, but Ralph won't take it. He tries to crush King Candy, to which King Candy puts on a pair of glasses and says, "You wouldn't hit a guy with glasses, would you?" Ralph just grabs the glasses and hits them on his head. The tension finally dies down when King Candy pulls out Ralph's medal, and that's when Ralph stops attacking to let him speak. He says that if Vanellope wins the race and gets put on the roster, she'll be able to be chosen by the players. And if they see her glitch, they'll think the game's busted and they'll get unplugged, leaving all the people gameless. But only one person won't be able to escape, Vanellope, because she's a glitch, and glitches can't leave their game, so she'll die along with the game when it gets unplugged, as King Candy states. So Ralph decides to help King Candy by trying to convince Vanellope that she can't race in the game. Now this, kids, is technically bribery, which I do not stand for. But Ralph falls for it anyway. So gullible. Now Ralph tries to convince Vanellope to get out of the race, but she won't listen to him and calls him a traitor when she finds out that he's been hanging out with King Candy. She says that she can win the race without him, but Ralph won't let her and he puts her on top of a lollipop tree branch as he destroys the cart with his bare hands. It's kind of like when your parents say you can't have candy because it's not good for you, you know. They try to protect you from cavities, which is kind of what Ralph is trying to do, but I don't think he was going about it the right way. So Vanellope eventually glitches off the tree onto the ground and says,
You really are a bad guy.
and then she runs back off to her lair. Now, kind of crazy that just before that, she gives him a homemade medal that says My Hero on it, which kind of made it harder for Ralph to tell Vanellope that she couldn't race. As Ralph returns back to his home with the medal, he comes to the penthouse to discover that everyone left when Felix came looking for Ralph and didn't return, which he learns from Jean, who gives Ralph the key to the penthouse as he's about to leave like the rest of the Nicelanders. As Ralph is fed up with the world, he tosses his medal at the out of order sign on the front of the screen. A piece of the out of order sign peels off, and Ralph sees the Sugar Rush console from across the room, with Vanellope's face on the side of the console. Looks like somebody has some explaining to do. So Ralph makes his way back over the Sugar Rush and finds Sour Bill, King Candy's apprentice, sweeping the wreckage up from Vanellope's cart. Sour Bill refuses to talk until Ralph swishes him in his mouth for a little while. That's when he finally decides to talk. And he says that King Candy unplugged Vanellope from the game to try to read her code. That's what makes her a glitch. And if Vanellope crosses the finish line, the game will reset, and she won't be a glitch anymore. So that's why King Candy doesn't want her racing. But Sour Bill doesn't know why King Candy tried to delete her code, because King Candy locked up all the citizens' memories. Now, Ralph, he needs to know where these people are, you know. So Ralph finds out that Vanellope and Felix are in the fun gym. So he takes the trash can with Vanellope's broken card in it with him, and leaves Sour Bill to stick around on a lollipop. Y'all see what they did there? That was a pretty good pun, not gonna lie. Meanwhile, in jail, Felix is moping about life until Ralph shows up. And at first, Felix is happy to see Ralph, but then he remembers all the trouble he has gone through looking for Ralph. He says Ralph doesn't know what it feels like to be abandoned and not cared about. And that's when Felix finally realizes what Ralph goes through each day. So Felix decides to help Ralph fix the cart, which Ralph recently destroyed. Then Ralph finally frees Vanellope, who is chained up with a bunch of chains, looking sad, until Ralph shows up, and they do one of the most adorable apologies in the world. So the race begins back at the starting line, where all the racers have already taken off. But Vanellope had also taken off just a few seconds after them, and she planned to win. All the other racers were shocked to see Vanellope in the race and tried to slow her down by lighting up a bunch of explosive cherries. But that doesn't stop her, and she glitches right by them. And when they're in the tunnel, they all land in a cupcake, getting what they so desperately deserve. That's what I call some good old-fashioned karma. Back at the starting line, trouble has ensued as the cyborgs have begun attacking Sugar Rush. Luckily, Calhoun has returned. Well, we all think it's a happy moment, but she punches Ralph right in the face because he's the one who let a cyborg get into the game and lay all those little eggs as she tells all the people to head for the entrance of the game. Now back with Vanellope, she passes right past King Candy in slow-mo, which King Candy crashes right into the back of her cart to try to get her off the track. Here, all the characters see the two characters fighting it out on the screen, and we see King Candy turn into the one and only Turbo, the one name that has been said throughout the entire movie. Turbo, for some background information. He was a guy who used to be a part of this game called Turbotastic. But then, a new racing game got plugged in right next to him. And the old boy was turbo jealous. He didn't like that no one was playing his game anymore. So he switched over to that game to try to become the star in there. But then he ended up crashing it. And both of the games got unplugged. They all thought Turbo was dead, but no. Now he reveals that he's been trying to become the greatest racer of all time, and that's why he unplugged Vanellope's code. As he tried to destroy her by ramming her and her car into a fork in the road, she's finally able to control her glitch for the first time and leaves King Candy in the dust as he gets attacked by a cyborg. Now, Vanellope almost makes it to the finish line until a whole bunch of cyborgs pop up from the ground, and they destroy the finish line itself. As well, God Vanellope saying they gotta get out of there as they head for the entrance, but it's no use. Glitches can't leave their game. No matter how hard Ralph tried, he couldn't get Vanellope through the entrance. Calhoun says the world would be helpless without a beacon to stop the cyborgs. And that's when Ralph thinks of something that could be perfect. The perfect beacon. The Diet Coke Mountain Volcano. Now, if that's not what y'all are thinking about, I don't know where y'all have been this entire time. As he makes his way to the top of the volcano and starts destroying the Mentos, so it'll cause a giant explosion. That could be the beacon for the cyborgs. Yeah, smart thinking there, Ralph. Just when all he was about to do the hardest hit in his life, he's whacked back by none other than Gene. I told you, Ralph, you'll never be a good guy, and I'm going to make sure that this world burns to the ground. Now, Ralph is in total shock here. Why would Gene want to destroy Sugar Rush? JK, it wasn't Gene, y'all. Even though that would have been some plot twist. But no, it was King Candy, who had turned into a hybrid cyborg. King Candy takes hold of Ralph and flies him up into the sky so they can both watch Vanellope die by the cyborgs. But Ralph won't take it. He breaks free of King Candy's grip and is going to punch right into the volcano. As he gets ready, he says the bad guy's affirmation as he looks at the necklace Vanellope gave him before going all in. As he smashes into the mountain, breaking all the Mentos as they fall into the Diet Coke. We see as he slowly begins to fall in midair, and for a moment we think this could be the end of our hero. Until Vanellope shows up in a race car, and cyborgs, including King Candy, go right into the Diet Coke, never to be seen again. Back at the track, Felix fixes the finish line, so Vanellope can cross the finish line and reset the game, which he does, and she's transformed into a princess, and Sugar Rush returns back to its normal good old self, and all the people receive their memories back. Turns out that Vanellope is the true leader of Sugar Rush. She jokes around with the racers who bullied her, saying that they will all be executed, which makes them all start crying and begging for mercy. But Vanellope says that she was only kidding with them. And so she takes on the title of President Vanellope Von Sweets. As well, Calhoun and Felix have to make their way back to the games before the arcade opens. Now, back in Ralph's game, he's no longer looked upon as a bad guy after work, and all the Nightlanders are finally being nice to him for a change. They even decide to include Cuba and all of his friends into the game's bonus level, since their game got unplugged and all. And Felix and Calhoun end up getting married, which, let's be honest, was kinda obvious that it was going to happen. We all saw the chemistry between the two of them. Now, in the end, Ralph is happy with his new life. Like, he doesn't even live in a stump anymore, because Felix makes him a whole little apartment place where he lives with all Cuba's friends. So, yeah, I mean, I like to live there, you know? It was pretty legit now. Indian Ralph is happy with his new life. As the movie about to end, we see Ralph getting thrown off the building by the Nicerlanders. He sees Vanellope as one of the players has just won the race with her. They both wave across the arcade to each other. And the movie fades to black as When Can I See You Again plays by Owl City, which I gotta say was really a good song for the end credits. At the end of the day, this movie is all about embracing who you are and not trying to be someone you're not, like Ralph tried to do. Ralph wasn't happy with his life, so he decided to try to be the good guy, but we can all see how that turned out. This movie also has a lot to do with accepting others for who they are, even if they are different from us. But that's all I gotta say about Wreck-It Ralph. Join me next week as I talk about how Mufasa is actually the villain of The Lion King. The Andrew Brown tuning off. And remember to share this with your friends and family, and let us know in the comments what topics you'd like to see me discuss in the future. And a special shout out to Ian Mitchell for creating that fantastic opening soundtrack. And a huge thank you to Sophie Story for that amazing cover art. Like holy moly guacamole. They both did an excellent job. So let's give them a round of applause. Well, that wraps up today's episode. Until next time, see ya. Until the next pod.